I left town for 3 days, just 3. And when I came back, someone had poured a concrete foundation right across my only driveway like it had always belonged there, like I didn't exist, like my home at the end of that road was just some rumor in the woods. I remember sitting there in my truck, engine still running, staring at it, thinking maybe I took a wrong turn, maybe I was on the wrong property. But no, those pine trees, that bend in the gravel, that old split-rail fence leaning just a little too far to the left, that was mine, had been mine for over a decade. And sitting right in the middle of it, steel rods sticking up like ribs out of fresh concrete, was the beginning of someone else's garage. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who startles easy. I moved out here on purpose, 8 acres tucked into the edge of a quiet county most folks only pass through on their way to somewhere else. No streetlights, no traffic noise, just wind through the trees and the occasional sound of a truck on the main road about 300 feet out. That driveway, it wasn't just a strip of gravel, it was the only way in or out, carved decades ago, long before I ever bought the place back in 2011. The previous owner told me it had been there since the early 80s, and when I had the land surveyed before closing, I made sure that entire stretch sat well within my property lines. I've maintained it ever since, cleared branches after storms, filled potholes every spring, even had it graded one year after a bad winter tore it up pretty good. So yeah, when I say that driveway mattered, I mean it. Up until about 2 months before all this, nobody had ever questioned where my land ended. The lot next door had sat empty for years, just more trees blending into mine. No clear boundary unless you knew where to look. Then one day, a couple from out of state bought it. Caleb and Nora Whitaker came down from Boston, said they were tired of city noise, wanted something slower, quieter, something real. I think that's the word Nora used when she introduced herself. First time I met Caleb, I was out by the driveway dragging a fallen branch off to the side after a storm rolled through the night before. He pulled up in this shiny SUV that looked like it had never seen dirt before, rolled the window down, gave me a friendly enough smile, asked how long I'd been living out there, what the winters were like, if the road ever flooded. Just small talk, polite, curious, nothing unusual. I told him I'd been there over a decade, that the driveway held up fine if you took care of it, and he nodded like he was filing that information away for later. Looking back, I think he was, because about 7 weeks after that conversation, I came back from a fishing trip with a buddy of mine, just a couple days upstate. No cell service, no interruptions, and I hit that bend in my driveway and saw concrete where there should have been open gravel. Not just a little bit either. This was a full foundation, squared off, framed, rebar sticking up in neat lines, like someone had been planning it for a while. It stretched right across the path, blocking it completely. No way around unless you wanted to plow straight through trees and underbrush. I sat there for a long minute, just gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of it, and then I did what anyone would do. I reached for my phone and called Caleb. He picked up on the second ring, calm as ever, like I'd just called to chat about the weather. "Hey man," he said, easy casual. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "You got a structure sitting on my driveway," I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't get to my house." There was a pause, not long, just enough to feel deliberate. "Oh, yeah," he said, like he was remembering something minor. "We thought that section was part of our lot. Builder measured it from the road." I blinked, actually blinked like maybe that would reset what I'd just heard. "No," I said, a little sharper now, "that's my land. I've got a survey that shows the entire driveway is inside my boundary." Another pause, this one colder. "Well," he replied, tone shifting just enough to notice. "Either way, we've already poured the foundation. You can still get through, just drive around it through the trees for now." I let out a short laugh, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe someone would say that out loud. "Drive around it? Through the woods? That's not a road, Caleb. It's your property, right?" He shot back, a little edge creeping in. "So use it." That's when I felt it, that slow burn starting in my chest, the kind that doesn't explode right away, but sits there, building pressure. "Listen," I said, more controlled than I felt. "You need to stop construction and take that down. You're on my driveway." He didn't hesitate this time. "We're not tearing anything down," he said flat. "If you think there's an issue, take it up legally." And just like that, click. I sat there in my truck again, same spot, same view, but everything felt different now. The The quiet didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt tense, like the land itself was holding its breath. I ended up parking near the road and walking the rest of the way in, cutting through the trees, branches snapping under my boots, brushing past thick patches of brush that had never been meant as a path. By the time I reached my cabin, my jeans were scratched up and my patience was gone. That night, I pulled out the survey documents, spread them across my kitchen table, tracing the lines with my finger like I needed to see it again to believe it. The boundary was clear, no overlap, no ambiguity. That driveway, every inch of it, was mine. Next morning, I called my attorney, Daniel Price. Good guy, local, been handling property disputes around here longer than I'd even lived in the county. I told him everything, the foundation, the conversation, the fact they were still building. He didn't sound surprised, not entirely. Send me the survey, he said, and don't engage with them again directly. Let me handle it. By noon, he called me back. They're in the wrong, he said. Simple as that, completely. That structure is on your property, and it's obstructing your legal access. We'll send a formal notice, give them a deadline to remove it. How long? I asked. 10 days, he replied. That's more than fair. Fair? Yeah, that word stuck with me. Because as I stood there later that afternoon, looking out toward where my driveway disappeared behind that fresh slab of concrete, I had a feeling fairness wasn't something Caleb Whitaker was too concerned about. And I was about to find out just how far he was willing to push it. 10 days sounds like a long time. Until you're the one stuck parking your truck by the road and hiking through your own land like a trespasser just to get home. Every morning I'd grab my coffee, step outside, and instead of hearing gravel under tires, I'd hear nothing, just wind moving through the trees and that low, constant reminder sitting out there, a slab of concrete that had no business being where it was. And what made it worse wasn't just that it was there, it was that it kept growing. By day 3, they'd started framing. I walked out there that afternoon, cutting through the same rough path I'd made, and sure enough, lumber stacked neatly, guys in work boots moving like everything was perfectly normal, nail guns popping, voices carrying through the trees. One of them gave me a nod, like I was just another neighbor passing by, and for a second I almost asked him, "You know you're building on someone else's driveway, right?" But I didn't. It wasn't his fight. Caleb's truck was parked off to the side, clean as ever, like it didn't belong in that dirt. He was standing there with a set of plans rolled under his arm, talking to the foreman, pointing at angles, dimensions, completely at ease. I walked straight up to him. "You got 10 days, I said, not raising my voice, just stating it. My attorney sent the notice. He didn't even look surprised, just glanced at me, then back at the structure. "Yeah, we got it," he said. "And you're still building?" That's when he finally turned, gave me that same smile I'd seen the first day, except now it felt thinner, like it didn't quite reach his eyes. "My lawyer says we're within our rights to continue until there's a court order," he replied, casual as ever. "So that's what we're doing." I stared at him for a second, trying to decide if he really believed that or if he just didn't care. "You're building on land that isn't yours," I said. He shrugged. "That's what courts are for." There it was again, that same line, like everything could just be delayed, stretched out, turned into paperwork until it didn't matter anymore. "Or," he added, almost as an afterthought, "we can work something out. Maybe an easement. You let us keep the garage where it is, we compensate you." I let out a slow breath, shook my head. "You want me to give up my only access to my house, so you can keep a garage?" "It wouldn't block you," he said quickly, like he'd rehearsed this. "We'd redesign the approach, maybe curve your driveway around the structure, make it nicer, honestly." I actually laughed this time, a real one, short and sharp. "You mean you'd redesign my property after you built on it without permission?" His jaw tightened just a little. "Look, we're trying to be reasonable here." "No," I said, stepping closer. "You're trying to make a mistake permanent." That smile disappeared completely. "Well," he said, voice flattening out, "then I guess we'll let the judge decide." And just like that, conversation over. I walked away before it turned into something worse, but my hands were clenched the whole way back, nails digging into my palms. It wasn't just the garage anymore. It was the attitude, the assumption that if you pushed hard enough, long enough, people would just give in. That night, I called Daniel again, told him they were still building. He sighed, not surprised, but not pleased either. "All right," he said. "Then we move faster." The next morning, he filed for immediate injunctive relief, basically asking the court to step in and stop construction before it went any further. He explained it to me in plain terms. "We're not just arguing about property lines anymore," he said. "We're arguing about access. They're blocking your legal right to reach your home. Judges take that seriously." I hoped he was right. But the thing about legal processes, they move at their own pace. And in the meantime, life keeps happening. And so did construction. By the end of the first week, the frame was up. By the second, they'd started on the roof trusses. It was surreal watching it take shape, like some kind of slow-motion invasion, each board another inch of ground taken, each nail driven a reminder that they weren't backing down. I started documenting everything: photos, videos, timestamps. Daniel told me to keep records, said it would help in court. So every day, I'd walk out there, stand at the edge of my own blocked driveway, and take pictures of something I shouldn't have been seeing in the first place. One afternoon, I ran into Nora. She was standing a little off to the side, watching the crew work, arms folded, sunglasses on. She looked different up close, less polished than when I first met her, more tense. "Hey," she said when she noticed me, voice softer than Caleb's had ever been. "Hey," I replied. There was a pause, the kind where both people know exactly what's wrong but don't know how to start. "This is getting out of hand," she said finally, glancing toward the structure. I nodded. "Yeah, it is." She shifted her weight, looked back at me. "Caleb thinks the builder messed up the measurements. He says it's not entirely our fault." I studied her for a second. "And what do you think?" Another pause. "I think," she hesitated, then exhaled, "I think we should have double-checked before pouring concrete." That was the first honest thing I'd heard from either of them. "It's not too late," I said, not unkindly. "You can still fix it." She gave a small, tired smile. "You should try telling him that." I did. She nodded, like she already knew how that conversation went. "Look," she added, lowering her voice a bit. "He's under a lot of pressure. We put a lot into this move, financially, emotionally. He doesn't want to feel like he made a mistake this big." I let that sit for a second, because I understood that. I really did. Nobody likes admitting they're wrong, especially when it costs something. But this wasn't a small mistake. "He's not just protecting his pride," I said. "He's taking my access away. That's not something you just work around." Her expression tightened. "I know." And for a moment, just a moment, it felt like maybe there was a crack there, something that could have stopped this before it got worse. But cracks don't matter if no one's willing to widen them. A few days later, Daniel called me. "We've got a hearing," he said. "Judge assigned, date set. It's moving quicker than usual." "When?" "Next week." I looked out toward the driveway again, at the nearly completed structure, walls up, roof halfway done, like they were racing the clock. "They're not slowing down," I said. "I didn't expect them to," Daniel replied. "But it won't help their case." The night before the hearing, I barely slept. Not because I doubted the survey or the law, but because I'd seen enough in life to know that being right doesn't always mean things go your way, not immediately. Next morning, I put on a button-down I hadn't worn in years, drove into town, and met Daniel outside the courthouse. Small building, nothing fancy, but walking in, it felt heavier than it should have. Caleb was already there, standing with his attorney, sharp suit, city energy, the kind of guy who probably billed by the minute. Nora stood beside him, quieter than usual. Caleb glanced at me as I walked in. No smile this time. Just a quick look, like we were already past introductions, past politeness, straight into something else. We didn't speak. Inside the courtroom, everything felt contained, controlled. Like all the tension that had been building out there in the woods was now compressed into a quiet space where every word mattered. When the judge walked in, everyone stood. And just like that, it was out of our hands. Courtrooms have a way of shrinking everything down. All the noise, all the frustration, all those days of walking through the woods just to get home. It all gets distilled into a few pieces of paper, a handful of photos, and whoever can explain it better in a quiet room. I remember sitting there, hands folded tighter than I realized, listening to Daniel lay it out clean and simple. Survey lines, property boundaries, the history of the driveway, the fact that it was my only legal access point. No drama, no raised voice, just facts stacked on top of each other like bricks. Caleb's attorney went next, and I'll give him this. He was smooth. Talked about reasonable reliance on a contractor's measurements. about good faith construction, about how tearing down a nearly completed structure would cause undue financial hardship. He even floated the idea again, right there in court, of negotiating an easement, like this was all just a misunderstanding that could be solved with a handshake and a check. I kept my eyes on the judge. Judge Halvorsen, older guy, didn't say much while they were talking, just listened, flipping through the documents, pausing every now and then at the survey. When he finally spoke, it wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The survey is clear, he said, matter of fact. The structure in question is entirely on the plaintiff's property. You could feel the room shift just slightly. He looked over at Caleb's side. And more importantly, it obstructs the plaintiff's sole access to his residence. No one interrupted. No one could. Then he set the papers down, folded his hands, and delivered the part that stuck with me. You had an obligation to verify your boundaries before construction began, he said, steady and direct. Relying solely on a contractor's measurement does not absolve you of that responsibility. Caleb shifted beside his attorney, just a small movement, but it said everything. The judge continued, you are hereby ordered to remove the structure in its entirety within 14 days. Failure to comply will authorize the plaintiff to arrange for its removal, with all associated costs to be borne by the defendants. 14 days. That number landed heavy, not just because of what it meant, but because of how simple it sounded after everything that had happened. The gavel came down, and just like that, it was over. Or at least, it should have been. Outside the courtroom, Caleb finally spoke to me. This isn't over, he said, low enough that it didn't carry, but sharp enough that it didn't need to. I held his gaze for a second. It could be, I replied. You've got 14 days. He let out a breath through his nose, almost a laugh, but not quite. We'll see. Nora didn't say anything. She just looked at me. And there was something different there now, something closer to resignation than defiance. The first few days after the ruling, nothing happened. No crews. No equipment. The structure just sat there, quiet, like it was waiting to see who would make the next move. I kept expecting to wake up and hear the sound of demolition, the grind of machinery breaking it down piece by piece. But day 5 passed, then day 7, then 10. And still nothing. I called Daniel. They're not doing anything, I said. I figured they might try to run the clock, he replied. But the order is clear. Once those 14 days are up, you have the right to act. Day 14 came and went. The garage was still standing. Walls finished, roof mostly done, looking less like a mistake and more like something permanent, like they were betting I wouldn't follow through. That was their second mistake. Day 15, I woke up early. Earlier than usual, the kind of early where the air still feels cold and everything's quiet in that heavy way just before sunrise. I made coffee, didn't drink much of it, just stood there for a minute, staring out toward the driveway. Then I grabbed my keys. Tony Ramirez had been doing demolition work in this county longer than I'd lived there. Solid guy, no nonsense, knew the land, knew the laws, and more importantly, knew how to do a job clean. I'd already spoken to him the day before, gave him a copy of the court order, walked him through the situation. You sure you want to go through with this? He'd asked me, not doubting, just making sure. Yeah, I told him, I am. So when I pulled up near the road that morning, Tony and his crew were already there. Excavator on the trailer, a couple of guys checking equipment, sipping coffee out of thermoses. Daniel showed up too, said he wanted everything documented properly, just in case. We notified the sheriff ahead of time, not because we needed permission, but because it kept things clean. Last thing I wanted was this turning into something it didn't need to be. By the time the sun started coming up through the trees, we were moving. The excavator rolled off the trailer with that heavy metallic clank, tracks biting into the dirt, engine rumbling low. Tony climbed up into the cab like it was just another day at work, and in a way, for him, it was. For me, it wasn't. We made our way down what used to be my driveway, or at least the part that wasn't blocked, and then there it was again, the garage, standing quiet, solid, like it still believed it belonged there. Tony looked at me from the cab, gave a small nod. You good? He called out. I took a breath, long, steady, then nodded back. Yeah, do it. The first hit wasn't dramatic, not like in movies. It was controlled. The bucket came down against one of the walls, a dull, heavy impact, wood cracking under pressure. Then another, and another, until the structure started to give. Once it started, it didn't take long. Walls folded inward, roof trusses snapped and collapsed, nails screeching as they tore free. The sound echoed through the trees, louder than anything that had been out there in years, a kind of mechanical thunder that didn't stop. Concrete was the hardest part, but even that, under the weight of the machine, eventually broke. Slabs cracked, rebar twisted and pulled free, the foundation that had blocked me for weeks reduced to jagged pieces. I stood there the whole time, didn't say much, didn't move much either. Just watched. Not with anger, not anymore. More like closure. About halfway through, I heard a car coming down the road fast. Tires on gravel. Engine pushed harder than it should have been. Caleb. He jumped out before the car had fully stopped, eyes wide, taking in the scene like he couldn't quite process it. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted, voice breaking through the noise of the machinery. Tony paused, just for a second, looking at me. I stepped forward. "You had 14 days, I said, calm, steady. "This is destruction of property." Caleb shot back, face flushed. "I'm calling the police. I'm pressing charges. You can't just." I reached into my jacket, pulled out the folded copy of the court order, and handed it to him. He snatched it, eyes scanning, jaw tightening with every line. "You were ordered to remove it." I continued. "You didn't. This is the result." For a moment, he just stood there, paper in hand, dust in the air around him, the sound of his garage being torn apart still echoing behind us. Nora stepped out of the car then, slower, quieter. She looked at the structure, or what was left of it, and didn't say anything. Caleb finally looked up at me, anger still there, but now mixed with something else, something heavier. "This isn't over," he muttered again. I gave a small nod. "It is for me." By early afternoon, it was done. 6 hours. That's all it took to erase something that had caused weeks of tension, arguments, legal filings, sleepless nights. Where the garage had stood, there was now open ground again, rough, torn up, but clear. My driveway was mine again. A few weeks later, Caleb did try to sue, claimed damages, construction costs, threw out a number just shy of 20 grand. But it didn't go far. The same judge dismissed it almost immediately, ordered him to cover my legal fees, plus additional costs for the damage his construction had caused to the surrounding land. And just like that, it was really over. Or at least, the legal part was. We still live next to each other. That's the part people don't talk about. No fences went up overnight, no dramatic move-outs. Just distance. Quiet. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful anymore, just careful. Sometimes I see them out there, working on their actual property, staying well within their lines now. We don't wave. We don't talk. And honestly, I'm not sure what I would say if we did. Because here's the thing. I was right. Legally, completely right. But every time I drive down that cleared path now, tires crunching over fresh gravel where concrete used to be, I can't help but wonder where the line really is between standing your ground and letting something go before it turns into all of this. Maybe there wasn't another way. Or maybe there was, and we just missed it somewhere between pride, pressure, and the need to not be the one who backs down. I don't know. What I do know is this: boundaries matter. Not just the ones on paper, but the ones people choose to respect or not. So I'm curious what you think. Was I justified in tearing it down the second I legally could, or should I have given them more time, tried harder to work something out? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because out here, in places like this, sometimes the law settles the dispute. But it doesn't always settle the story.